Welcome to Bruins Diehards, your source for all things Boston Bruins. And as usual, we're doing a podcast here, but as I always want to start off, I want to thank each and every one of you for always tuning in, hopping in the comments. As always, click like and subscribe. Today, it's going to be a fun one for me. I have one of my longest running friends in Bruins social media / Twitter / met in person, Mick Colageo here from Boston Hockey Now and the Rink Rap Report. Now, for everybody here, I have known Mick for, I would say, 9-10 years now. And believe it or not, Mick was the first person, probably the reason Bruins Diehards actually exists. So he was the first person to ever give me the time of day on the internet, let's say. I think that's the perfect way to describe it. Everybody else would ignore me. Mick actually started up conversations with me. He has reunited me with family members. I have spent time with him in Boston every time I go. One of my closest friends on the internet, Mick Colageo.
Be here, didn't realize I played that significant a part. All I remember was I was in Harwichport behind Bonat's Bakery, which is right off of Route 28 in Harwichport, Cape Cod, Mass, sitting in the back parking lot, enjoying a melt-away Danish, and just having a conversation with you because you asked. And I was thrilled to know you, and got to know Dom through you, and so this has been a really great association for me. We used to have this wonderful thing about 20 years ago that probably still exists, Hockey's Future. And the forum was called HF Boards. And I was a regular there. And my moniker was Doc Five Hole. And that was a nickname that a former Boston radio host gave me when they brought me on to do short segments on the Bruins. And Mike Evans, I want to say. So, any case, that stuck with me. And Kevin DuPont never stopped calling me that. And some of the people, the survivors of that era, still reach out to me via social, which is a lot of fun to still know some of these people. And that we had a camaraderie when hockey was not all that, and the Bruins were not all that in the city of Boston. So fun that this has sort of become a new generation community for me to connect with my friends north of the border.
Well, it's funny that you say you didn't know that, but you still remember the first time we chatted and had a big, long conversation. And it is funny that you mentioned Kevin Paul DuPont because he famously outed me to all of Bruins Twitter. That my dad had relations.
I didn't realize he did that.
Yeah, he was the one that made the joke about my dad during the playoffs that one time. Like he's saying, "Oh, my question's as short as Bobby Lalonde." But anyways, I digress. and I hopped in his DMs.
Awesome.
It was funny. That was the first time where I had like everybody from Bruins media within seconds DMing me on Twitter, and the amount of people that I got to follow me within seconds just so they could say, "Hey, your dad just got made fun of by Kevin Paul DuPont." It's right up there for me in things. Just like when Elliot Friedman did it last year and I clapped back, and then Jeff Merrick hopped into my DMs, and now I've met him in person, and he's like a great person, and like I talked to him, great guy. Hockey is a small world, and I love it. So I want to get into what we're talking about today on the show. We're going to recap the Bruins 3-0 win last night over the division-leading Detroit Red Wings. Jonathan Aspirot's extension. Should we be worried about Morgan Geekie's slump? Who the heck are the Boston Bruins this year? Crazy things that Mick has covered over the years. For the people that don't realize, Mick has covered the Bruins for what year did you start covering the Bruins, Mick?
91-92 season.
91. So probably for some of you listening, longer than you've been alive. And we're going to end a note on something that I really wanted to talk about because a very special game is coming up in Boston, and that's to celebrate Zdeno Chara's number being lifted to the rafters. So we are going to talk about some of our favorite Zdeno Chara moments on and off the ice, because I can say this with a smile on my face. The man is a legend in Boston, and deservedly so, to get his number hanging up in the Garden. And I'm sure without fail that Patrice Bergeron will get his next year. I think they just can't do them all in the same year. Like, who are we kidding? But that's where we're going to end the show. So let's get into it. Mick, the Boston Bruins just beat the leading Detroit Red Wings 3-0 in To be totally honest, I would say one of their best victories of the year, and this is just from my perspective. Going into that game, I thought it was an easy game to lose. Even though Detroit is going on a back-to-back, it's still an easy game for the Boston Bruins to lose at home, playing the division Red Wings and saying, "Well, they're the league leader, and we've been struggling this year on and off." They go in back-to-back shutouts. Swayman's first of the year. We had Corpusalo before. They had a pretty not so good second period, but they somehow rallied back from a couple saves. What was your take on the game last night, Mick?
Okay, let me preface it by saying this. The Bruins were in a desperate situation where they needed to cash in on the opportunity of hosting. I think three of the last four home games were against teams that were playing on the second night of back-to-backs. And last night was particularly emotional for the Red Wings, raising Sergei Fedorov's 91, and a big win over the Carolina Hurricanes, a game with a 3-0 lead. They got hairy at the end until they won it. And then they come into Boston, and Dylan Larkin um, was not himself.
No.
13 lifeless minutes and horrible in the face-off circle. Uh, that said, DeBrincat was a monster, and that team uh, can makes pushes. They're a good team that can push. And the thing that the Boston Bruins are doing better now than they did earlier in the season is make teams take the tough road out of their zone, make them take the tough road through the middle of the rink, and make them take the tough road to gaining an ozone possession. They did the same thing with Pittsburgh. They made them run the gauntlet. And the Bruins are doing a much better job on the forecheck because of the reloading that they do that closes off the easy outs, and it closes off the easy throughs and the easy ins. And it also cuts down severely on the early game odd mans and grade A's that they have made their goalies face for most of the first half of the season. They are playing a better brand of game right now and adhering to it, and have managed to do this even though they could easily have been seduced by that 10-2 romp over the Rangers. They came back and won the next day in a squeaker. So uh, they're playing, and I think that it's no coincidence. They don't have Hampus Lindholm right now, but their health in general has trended upward in recent weeks. McAvoy being back, Yoki Haru being back and playing very well, by the way. So it's really allowed them to be a better hockey team at a time where they need to get off this 6 up, 6 down, or is it 2 weeks up, 2 weeks down? And there are emerging improvements with this club that make me believe that there's at least a chance that they can try to flatten out higher up and have their average not be, some mathematical equation of good and bad stretches, but rather, which is so common to the Eastern Conference this year, but really be a better version of themselves going forward, which they need to be to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think it's no secret that the Bruins have for years relied on their defense to help them win hockey games. And when Charlie McAvoy went down with, a horrible injury that, it's just a freak accident, shatters his jaw, cracks it right down the side there. He hasn't looked like himself, but I thought last night he looked like Charlie McAvoy that we saw when he broke into the league against the Ottawa Senators. He had a jump in his step. He looked hard. He was getting the puck out of the zone properly and not making those. I always say making smart decisions. I talked about this with my daughter all the time when she's like, "Well, I didn't score." And I was like, "Yeah, but you made so many smart decisions on the ice." I thought Charlie McAvoy last night made a ton of smart decisions. He was holding on to the puck when he usually shoot from the point, especially on that. We'll talk the three goals scored, Pavel Zacha, Fraser Minton again, and then Mark Kastelik at the very end. But I thought Minton scores because Charlie McAvoy was Charlie McAvoy again, and we haven't seen it, I would say, in almost a year. I didn't think he was the same person when he came back from his injury last year, during the season. I thought he got off to a pretty slow start this year, even though he's been decent. I was just happy to see Charlie McAvoy entering the rush, being part of the play, and looking more confident on the ice last night. And I think that goes a long way for this Boston Bruins team to be successful.
let's remember that Marco Sturm did a lot of his own theorizing and experimenting when he took over coaching the Bruins. And when the season begins in October, he's going for balanced defense pairings. He's thinking idealistically. He's got Mason Lohrei playing with Charlie McAvoy. And at that point of the season, Mason Lohrei was the same minus machine that he was down the tanking portion of post trade deadline 24-25. And that brought McAvoy down and put doubt in his game. And Charlie McAvoy plays the game at such a high speed and so aggressively and physically that is a little like a golfer that can hit the ball 400 yards off the tee. If he gets in trouble, it's big trouble. And Nikita Zadorov is also like that. So when you have volatility and your blue line talent being compromised by a situation that needed to be fixed, and in this case, it was a McAvoy Lohrei pairing with Lohrei not showing improvement that was expected on the containment in his own zone prior to getting the puck, decisions with the puck. He wound up getting scratched for something like 6 straight games. And he came back a better player, but he also came back into a more protected matchup. So when the Bruins have had the luxury of health, they have kept the situation so that Lohrei was sheltered in terms of matchups and telling him you got to work on this. And he's been, for the most part, much, much better as the season has gone along. Jonathan Aspirot has been the revelation, the Parker Wotherspoon of 25-26, the guy who played his whole career in the minors because he was stuck behind a logjam of good players. And the Bruins got him at the right time, introduced him to the NHL. And the guy even has played well on the right side before his own injury. Now Aspirot playing with Charlie McAvoy with Hampus out and doing it with aplomb. It's just incredible what this guy's been able to do. So, and if that transitions you into the Aspirot extension discussion, then let it be so. It's incredible. It's a one. He's still on a two-way this year, but it's a one-way next year and the year after at less than $1 million with this rising cap. Win-win for both sides.
Yeah, so at 8,800, 887,500, it's a very, very good cap hit for the Boston Bruins, and thank you for the transition there, Mick. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm an old radio guy, believe it or not.
Well, I can believe that one. I could make a joke there, but I'm gonna let it go.
I
But
got a faith for radio.
I was very happy with this. I was surprised to see many people saying, "Oh, the Bruins could have paid him more." It's very interesting with the fan base. They'll either say that the guy is overpaid or he's underpaid, but I haven't seen we should have paid him more. I do like what he brings to the table. I do not see him as a top pairing defenseman, but he's filling in for Lindholm right now. I do see him as a bottom six. It's interesting because I look at the future of this Boston Bruins team, and I still think they're going to be sellers regardless of what happens because they've got two pending UFAs that they could possibly get some very good assets back in return. Because as much as I would love to say it, I don't think this Boston Bruins team is a Stanley Cup contender, but I thought this was a tidy piece of business from Don Sweeney and co. to get this guy locked up because he fits their system. I've said this about players many times. There's many a player that will fit a team system and then they go on to go play somewhere else and they don't look like the same player because they're in a new system, the new town, all that kind. It plays a role and I've always wondered when a player has a career year or plays better somewhere, it's very interesting when they leave. Jonathan Marchessault is a perfect example of a guy who goes to Nashville and looks like a shell of himself than what he was in Vegas. It's just, there's a lot of times, or even Steve Stamkos, who's gotten better, but like you stick where you are, you're good. But players, they're people, so they have their idiosyncrasies and feel, well, this is what I deserve. But I think Jonathan Aspirot has deserved his contract. He's played well for the Bruins, and I think they might have found something in a guy that's going to be dependable for him. He's not going to be flashy, but he's going to help you.
In the 1977-78 season, the Bruins had a seasoned tandem of goaltending with Jerry Cheevers, who was pretty deep into his career. In that season, the Bruins finished second overall to the dynastic Montreal Canadiens. The Bruins put up 113 points. I think they won 50 games. That was a year that they had still an NHL record, 11 20 goal scorers. And with Gilles Gilbert's injury that season, they had Ron Graham, who had been in the WHA, World Hockey Association, but Graham won the Bruins 40 regular season games, 4-0. So the Los Angeles Kings needed a goalie, and they went at the Bruins and said, we'll give you a first round draft pick for Ron Graham. And Harry Sinden made the deal. And the Bruins, that wound up being the eighth. They didn't have a lottery back then. So that wound up being the 1979 draft, wound up being the eighth overall pick. And the guy that fell all the way to eight was Raymond Bourque. And the rest, as they say. So you can, and what happened to Ron Graham? Does anybody remember the rest of Ron Graham's career after that? I know he's had a son named Johnny who helped the Providence Bruins win the 99 Calder Cup and then was the backup to Habibulin when the Lightning won the Stanley Cup in 04. But that's more the legacy than anything Ron Graham did after that trade. And so you get GMs get ideas and they base it on a body of work, and the Kings thought that body of work was sufficient and to make that decision. Who knows what would have happened if that decision wasn't made? In Boston Bruins have a lot of ones that turned out great and a lot of ones that turned out horribly wrong. But that's the GM's job to become a crystal ball based on every piece of information they can get. And that's why they go so crazy now with meetings and staff and scouting and opinions and long table debates and go back and forth about all this stuff. That's movements are made so carefully now in the NHL. It's become a very professional league in all regards, including the crystal ball one.
Yeah, very rarely are deals made that day. Mind you, on trade deadline, it's a little different, but there's been deals that I have like known about and then they don't come to fruition. And I'm like, how did that not happen? Like it was so close to the finish line, but it takes them so long and then they'll almost talk themselves out of it. I think as much as people like to criticize Don Sweeney and co, and you know what, as fans, you're allowed to criticize management whenever you want. I totally get it. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying you're right. I'm just saying it's all fair. I think what he did at the trade deadline last year, I think was a nice, tidy piece of business. The re-signing of Aspirot here, I think was another nice, tidy piece of business. I think it's insurance for the possible, and it's not that he plays the same side. It's just kind of almost the same style. Because Andrew Peeke is a pending UFA at the end of the year, and the odds of him still being a Boston Bruin, if they're meddling on a possible playoff spot, if you're Don Sweeney, you'd be foolish not to see what the market entails, especially defensemen at that time. We've seen guys like Jeff Petrie get first-round picks. We've seen players of lesser ilk get first-round picks. Andrew Peeke is a dependable sixth defenseman, fifth defenseman, whatever on a team. He's a right-shot defenseman, which is extremely valuable in this league right now, and he plays a tough hockey game. So, but Jonathan Aspirot, yes, he's on the left side, but he also plays a tough hockey game, and he plays, dare I say, the way the Boston Bruins play over the years, because the Boston Bruins, for whatever, it doesn't matter who the coach is, always end up playing pretty much the same way since the 60s. I think that's fair to say, Mick. They just play a certain style of hockey, and I think Aspirot really does fall into that category of Bruins type of player.
He does everything well. He doesn't do anything on a highlight reel, except maybe the oddball hit, because he will step up on a zone entry and thump somebody. Also note that in defense of your argument that I will in general disagree with in a minute, I would say that Aspirot has been very, very good playing the right side as needed. In fact, when Joekie Harju was playing so poorly that he worked his way into Marco Sturm's doghouse, the November 15th game in which Charlie McAvoy took that puck off the jaw, that game, Joekie Harju was a healthy scratch, and Jonathan Aspirot was the right side, was preferred. His left shot was preferred. A guy who had never played the NHL before this season was preferred by Marco Sturm to play the right side in that game, which was a big, big game. And that, to me, said tons. Now, Joekie Harju was brought right back into the fray there, by the McAvoy injury. And otherwise, his scratch streak could have been like Mason Lowry's. Instead, he was forced right back in, but it gave him a jolt. He was obviously a better version of himself, and he's played a lot less quietly as Marco Sturm's system requires defensemen to eliminate players, eliminate forwards, attack the puck, go out and make plays. If a guy tries to cycle to the blue line, there may be a switch, but you play it like basketball in concept. And you we used to see Nick Boynton running out to the blue line and thinking, what's he doing way out there? And because that's how they were playing. And you filled in behind when a defenseman has to stunt out there to stay with somebody because you're playing some sort of a version of a man. And this is what the Bruins are doing now with Sturm. And so Jokiharju was getting picked off. Nobody wanted to get in Zadorov's way when he was chasing somebody out there. But it took a while for the Bruins as a team to really kind of pick this up. Now, one of the reasons they rode Andrew Peeke so hard was not only because when McAvoy was out of the lineup, but because Peeke excels in the areas that exude Sturm's man system. He plays carpe diem. He goes right after you. He's kind of like a right shot Milbury, a little bit of Adam McQuaid in his game, and he's very aggressive, very limited in how he plays, but very aggressive, but in a smart, structured kind of a way. And the Bruins rode him very hard until he seemed to hit a wall within the last few weeks. He certainly began to look tired.
Yeah, the wear and tear.
A lot of wear and tear there with Peeke. And I don't know if he's playing through something specific right now or not, but it definitely was the right time for Jokiharju to get his SHIT together, which he really has. I've really enjoyed watching him play these last couple of games. He looks to me like he gets it now, and he seems fully buying in.
And his first pass has been a lot better. Jokiharju is him and Andrew Peeke were my pizza guys. Where Lowry was the pizza guy last year, and he was a pizza guy at the beginning of the year. And by pizza guy, people, it's a hockey term of dumping it up the middle where you shouldn't. It should always be off the glass or off the boards, unless you have the perfect pass and you can make it. But Jokiharju was, oh my God, it was like he was always in a panic at the beginning of the year. And I think Marco Sturm was seeing it, and he looks more calm on the ice, more calm and collective, a lot like Jonathan Aspirot, who just seems to be a calming spirit on the ice. Like, the guy never looks like he's panicking, which is very interesting. He
That's
doesn't.
true.
And Jokiharju hasn't looked like that lately. So 100%, because at the beginning of the year, or even my halfway point, I was like, oh my God, like, this guy's playing terrible. But yes, I also have noticed that about Andrew Peeke. He gets into my doghouse a lot because he frustrates me on some of his decisions. He sometimes looks like the term I like to use is chicken with a head cut off, when he just decides, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go hit that guy, and that's all I care about, which happens. Zadorov had that in him last year. Zadorov was couldn't keep himself out of the penalty box guy. Kind of still has that a little bit.
Is.
Yeah, but not as bad. Not as bad, which is crazy when you think about it. Yes, but that leads me into the next thing I want to talk about, because we've talked about players changing how they played and changing what they've been doing. But this Boston Bruins team has gone winning streak, losing streak, winning streak, losing streak, getting blown out. Heck, our goalies just got their first shutouts of the year, and we're at the halfway point of the year. And Jeremy Swayman is, as much as the fan base, some of the fan base, I shouldn't say all, much as some of the fan base wants to dog him, but I think that's a Boston thing. For the people that don't realize, this has been going on since the days of Jerry Cheevers. The Boston Bruins fan base, for some reason, lives and dies by their goaltender. And if their goaltender makes 1 minute of a mistake, they're going to let him have it. Just, it is what it is. If Tim Thomas doesn't win a Stanley Cup, he is not remembered as the Tim Thomas everybody wants to remember him, because he was in the doghouse a ton from this fan base. Swayman is fifth in goals saved above expected right now at 14.3. He's actually having a career year with the Boston Bruins. The Bruins just give up a lot of high danger chances, a lot of odd man rushes. They were tightening up themselves, but I want to know from you, Mick, who is this team? Because at the beginning of the year, I thought personally they were possibly a wild card team. And then at some point this year, I was like, nope, they're bottom of the barrel, just like last year. And then some nights they play like one of the best teams in the league. Who is this Boston Bruins team?
It's very hard to bottle the energy, the manufacturing playoff energy is really tough to do over the course of 82, 6 months. The Bruins are one of those teams for whom all hell can break loose on any given night offensively when they do that. And that's why they've had some games where they look like they can score. And other teams care too. And some nights they got enough to match you, and they may be more technically proficient. And Ottawa is a funny team. Why aren't the Senators better? And this is before all the crazy stuff. Just as a hockey team, it's been a weird year for a team that has so much talent to not put it together for any stretch whatsoever that should put them in a position where they should be better than they are. But Detroit has now become the team out of this group of teams that back in the triopoly or whatever we want to call it, when the Lightning, the Panthers, and the Bruins and the Leafs, when they had the division and everybody was saying, who's going to break through with all these teams that are trying to farm up young talent, whether it be Montreal, Detroit, Buffalo, or Ottawa. It looked like Ottawa was going to be that team. And now suddenly Detroit's become that team. They've leapfrogged them, and Ottawa is a mess. And now maybe this is partly why.
Detroit's got better defense. Let's be honest.
But I was really impressed with their defensive play last night. They have some guys who can really play the game, some big guys with skills, and they seem to match it with a lot of chutzpah. Some of these guys whose games I really didn't know very well. They're good players. Sider has company now.
Yeah,
Sherrod,
Sandin Pellikka, that guy can play.
that's who I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sandin Pellikka played a really solid game last night. Edvinsson was a pain last night. They're good, and if Larkin is the great version of himself, which we didn't see last night for whatever reason, then they're a team that should be coming. And so, boy, there's a lot of parity right now, and it's a hard sledding for anybody who's not having a standout season with their core players, as are the Lightning.
Yeah, and it's almost like in this division of the Atlantic. Right now, the Bruins are in fourth. They're in a wild card position ahead of the Toronto Maple Leafs with 54 points, Leafs with 53. It's almost like any given night between first and seventh place is only 10 points. It's crazy to me. Detroit has played the most games though at 48. Boston Bruins at 47, Montreal at 47. The Tampa Bay Lightning lead the division at 45 games played with 61 points. And dare I say the Boston Bruins at the beginning of the year had one of the tougher schedules in the NHL?
They did. Absolutely, they did.
And I think this could play into factor for the Boston Bruins after the Olympic break. I think it might work into their favor. I think the Olympic break is going to work into their favor because we now know Elias Lindholm is playing with something. He's hurt, to take him out of that game in that win when they knew, they just were like, hey, let's just take him out of the game. We know he's got an injury. So he would have been a game time decision pretty much, but they're not telling us more. We know Hampus Lindholm is skating with the team. He was on the ice a couple days ago, and then he skated with the team yesterday. Is that correct?
I cannot verify that, but I can say that I saw him on the ninth floor, and he looks like a guy who wants to be in uniform playing hockey. He doesn't look some. He's not walking around like he's got an injury.
Okay.
He looks to me like a guy there's something that they need to get taken care of before he should be, in uniform, because they want him. They want him there for the haul.
It's not like that time you and I were in the basement and we had we're not going to say a player's name, and he walked by. We both looked at each other and we're like, I guess we can't tell anybody what we just saw because he was in a sling. And I was like, oh my God, that's not a guy we want to be in a sling. And that guy never missed a game. So I was like, wearing a sling after the game scared me. But the Atlantic Division, the parity, you mentioned it before, it's crazy. And this Boston Bruins team is staying alive. 26 wins, 19 losses, 2 overtime losses, which is one of the lowest besides the Tampa Bay Lightning in that division. You've got Detroit with 4, Montreal with 7, Toronto with 7. It seems how crazy this division is when last year we still had that, the breakaways, the guys taking over the division. I still in my brain am like with the Florida Panthers in 7th place. I'm like, when are they going to make their run and just take over and get back into the playoff race. So it's like, what is going to happen? The Boston Bruins have Seattle on Thursday. They got destroyed by them the last time in Seattle. So this is a, we're going to come in and kick you in the face game for the Boston Bruins. They better, at least. What do you make of this team? Because why are we having so much of, is it injuries? What is causing this seesaw battle we have seen with this Boston Bruins team?
I actually asked Marco Sturm about this after the game last night. If the Bruins have emerging improvements that might help them escape this cycle of 2 weeks up, 2 weeks down, 6 games up, 6 games down, whatever it is. And he said he went through it. He looked at every team in the league and all their schedule, and he was trying to figure it out. And he said this is most of the teams are going through what we're going through. This is everybody. And so, how well you survive it, good health, roster health, obviously is going to be a factor, but there's got to be an improvement, an ongoing linear improvement in how you play. And the Bruins are showing that right now. They're reloading on the forecheck. They're making it hard sledding through the neutral zone. They're making Sidney Crosby dump the puck, and for the Penguins to try to win the battles in the corners, get it high, go to the net, take a shot. It's rudimentary stuff. That's just a very foundational, basic professional hockey, bare bones. If you can force the good teams to play that way, and the Bruins forced the Red Wings to play this way last night, then you're going to be in most games. Earlier in the season, I think the Bruins pressed a little bit when they started fancying themselves an offensive team, and then the goals dry up. Now you start trying to do too much, and you get out of your form, you get out of your structure, and teams are picking away at you because you have not yet figured out the system is not something you can intellectually apprehend and then just go out on the ice and make it happen. It just doesn't work that way. It's something that happens in fits and starts, and it happens where individuals make spike, they plateau, they spike, they plateau. You get somebody gets hurt, there's more unevenness. In the meantime, you're hoping all along the way the entire unit is getting better at getting this done and getting and mastering the way you're going to play the game. And I think the Bruins are finally turning a corner here. Excuse me, where they are playing the way Sturm wants them to play, and Hampus being the asterisk, are playing the system and beginning to let few of these games get away from them. And that's one of the reasons they don't have many loser points. They didn't have many last year either, by the way. The Bruins have had seasons before where it only took 38 wins to get in the playoffs because they had so many loser points. My theory has always been win half your games. 41 wins put you on the bubble if you have an average number of loser points. This holds true if you look at the CI standings all the way down the line. I think the most wins I've ever seen miss the playoffs was 44. Calgary Flames, I think, did that. I think the Bruins in 96 might have done that. You can win more games, but if you don't have enough, you got to have an average number of loser points and then win more than half your games, you'll make the playoffs. The Bruins have short on loser points. They let too many early season games get away from them because they were so vulnerable to grade A's early in games, relying on their goalies to bail them out of the first 5 minutes of hockey games and keep them in at 10 minutes into the first period when they get their bearings. And they're at a point now where they don't need that anymore. They're not allowing that anymore. And that makes me think that this Bruins team might make the playoffs. If they were just going to keep chugging along 2 weeks up, 2 weeks down, 2 weeks up, then they're going to be on the bubble to the end and miss. And right now, I think there's a possibility here that they are going to have their next flat line will be a better brand of hockey. And so the lows won't be as low. And as long as the lows aren't as low as they've been, then I think there's a much better chance of them this year getting where they want to go. They've managed to survive to this point. And now, to me, the biggest factor along the way is going to be a healthy roster.
You've mentioned Marco Sturm, and I hear your voice when I hear the locker room or when you're talking. I can always hear you when you're asking your questions. The difference between this team and last year's team and how they're playing, does that have anything to do with their identity and who they are? Like, the question is, who is this Boston Bruins team? I think they're a wild card team at this point for me personally, and a tough first round exit. I think their goaltending has played very good. I think their defense is smartened up in the last little bit, and that's going to help them win hockey games. And they're able. David Pastrnak is again playing unbelievable. In fact, I think here in Toronto, he gets mentioned a ton by a lot of radio stations as a Hart candidate, which is very interesting, just based on how the Boston Bruins are playing. A lot of the stations say if the Boston Bruins can get into a non-wild card spot and actually get a playoff spot, there has to be serious contention. But I think Colorado fans would be saying, "Hello, we have Nathan MacKinnon." But what is the difference have you seen between the Jim Montgomery / Joe Sacco team and this year's team? Because last year's team, it was almost a foregone conclusion in November that they weren't making the playoffs and they're going to fall on their face. This team is better than they were last year at this point, but how much better are they?
Biggest difference is the health of Charlie McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm. Those both, let's never forget that last year both of those players were lost for the season. Hampus early in the season for blocking a shot. He never made it back. McAvoy on a cheap shot by Yoel Armia at Four Nations in the Bell Center, the House of Horrors for him. He never played again after that. Let's we have to start there. No matter, well, we could say a lot more about it, but we have to start with that. That's number one. Number two, I would say, is that as evidenced by Don Sweeney's decision, once they had reached an impasse with Marchand, once they had raised the white flag because McAvoy and Hampus Lindholm were done, they identified not only Trent Frederick, but they moved on from Justin Brazeau. They moved on from Charlie Coyle and Brandon Carlo. Those two guys were on the fringe of the core prior to. But for the second straight season, Brandon Carlo didn't play particularly well. He did not look quite like himself from a couple of years earlier. I can't really put a finger on it. And Charlie Coyle looked like he may have hit the back nine. And the things that he does so well in taking some of the load, the D zone draws, and lifting some of the weight off the shoulders of the Bergeron Krejci sunset years, that player seemed to be eroding. And I think that Don Sweeney pulled the plug at the right time with those guys. Now, will those guys resurge in new surroundings? Carlo obviously has a lot of his career left ahead of him,
They're not
provided,
liking him here in
knocking on
Toronto.
wood.
He's he's getting lambasted on a regular basis in Toronto media.
They're the pre-2004 Boston Red Sox of my life. That's who the Toronto Maple Leafs are. That's, if you were around Boston before 2004, that's your Red Sox. Every year there's always finger pointing. There's always a fall guy. If it's usually the goalie, if you can't get at the goalie, you go somewhere else. There's going to be individuals are going to be tarred and feathered. That's the way it works. And I think that it may be tough sledding for him there. Who knows if they'll move on from him? I look at Coyle. He obviously, Nathan MacKinnon didn't like him.
Not at all.
And
Like a little, like
we
did
found
not
out
like
who,
him.
we found out who runs that team.
Yeah.
And so, but if Fraser Minton is the only thing that comes out of March 7th, the Bruins win.
100%. I think Fraser Minton is, as you know, Mick, my favorite style of hockey player is the two-way guy. I really like Fraser Minton. I really like his game. I really like it.
I saw him play for the first time last season, and on the moment did not feel like I was speaking crazy when I said, I just involuntarily, the words just came right out. I feel like I'm watching a young left-handed Bergeron.
I'm not there yet because I don't want to. I get it. I don't want to say that kind of stuff. People
Bergeron,
freak
but
out.
here's the thing to remember: Bergeron wasn't there yet either.
Yeah,
he was. I remember going to one of those AHL weekends, 3 games in 3 nights. So Peter Laviolette was behind me with some of our cousins because he married my cousin's daughter. So Peter Laviolette is coaching the Carolina Hurricanes, but they're not playing. So the 04-05 season, the Bruins have Patrice Bergeron centering for their AHL Providence Bruins. And Peter yells down at me, Mick, there's a lot of dog in this game. All right. Yeah, 3-3. That's how it's going to be. And I'm just telling him how much he's going to enjoy watching Bergeron play, and now the way he always makes the right play, like Damian Cox pointed out during the Olympics. A lot of those people didn't have Bergeron, the top 13 forwards. And then suddenly he's playing with Crosby, and I'm reading on social, Cox is writing, Bergeron, he makes the right play every single time. It's
Leaf
like,
fans
so
were loving Patrice Bergeron during that time.
yes, and he's not the kind of guy who jumps over the boards and wows you. I mean, half the Bruins media was saying before the season that Poitras and Winton were interchangeable. Both would be better off in Providence. Both this, both that. And I don't want to say anything negative about Matty Poitras, but I'm going to quote Wayne Gretzky. Shortly before Bergeron's catastrophic head injury against the Flyers early in the 07-08 season, the Bruins played their second game of the year in Arizona and beat the Coyotes. And after the game, Wayne Gretzky, who was coaching the Coyotes, kind of scolded the scrum in the hallway and said, I don't think you guys realize how good this guy is. He sounded like John the Baptist when he said it. I mean, it was really like, here's when the people widest acclaim as the greatest hockey player of all time. And if the asterisk, in Pittsburgh, they'll say Lemieux, I will say Bobby Orr, but I respect Wayne Gretzky. And he said this about a very young Patrice Bergeron, who is playing center ice on a Claude Julien team for the first time. And second game into the season, I don't think you guys realize how good this guy is. And because he knows every little piece of the ice, every little trick there is, and sees a guy who's only like 21, 22 years old and saying like, holy crap, this guy is really good. And it's like in subtle ways that people can't identify if you're not on a Gretzky kind of plane.
And it's
that really kind of impressed me.
It's interesting you say that, because I do remember a conversation that you and I had during training camp where I said, "Oh, I think Matty Poitras is going to make this team," and you said over Fraser Minton's dead body, and I was like, "Well, fair." And then you said, because you mentioned to me after he started last year, you were like, "I don't think this kid's coming out of the lineup." And then I started looking into him more, because I really liked the trade at the time. I knew he was a two-way forward and so on and so forth. And it was no offense to Matty Poitras. I'm not saying you
Right,
were, yeah,
right.
it was
Not
more
at
of,
all.
hey, he jumped him and there's not much you can do about it. And he's playing. Fraser Minton, again, plays the way we've wanted people to play in Boston for a really long time. And I'll say this, I'm not putting that Bergeron tag on him, but I will say that over the summer, he also had the pleasure of being, and still, Connor Bedard's best friend, and trained with him all summer. So he spent the summer shadowing and trying to take the puck off Connor Bedard. That
Didn't know
does
that.
help you. And you look at it this way, Brad Marchand, I'll still say, to his credit, some of the greatest things he ever did was spend his summers training with Nathan MacKinnon and Sidney Crosby, because it made him a better hockey player. He learned how to play the game the right way by being Patrice Bergeron's line mate, but in the offseason, he played with Nathan MacKinnon and Sidney Crosby. And that stuff goes a long way. It gets you to that next level. When players play with better players, they elevate their play. And I think the story of Fraser Minton is just starting to be written, and we'll see what he is. Is he a
Exactly.
3C or 2C? We don't know. But him getting the confidence, I can see from Marco Sturm. Marco Sturm puts him out in every situation. He plays him with David Pastrnak. That is huge. He's
He
playing
was
with
even on the power play last night. I
exactly.
mean, it's growing as it goes. And Donnie Sweeney always makes a beeline to the men's room during the final TV timeout of the third period. And until this season, my press seat was right in front of the men's room. So Donnie would always be guaranteed to come down. I'd see him walking down. We'd have a little nod to each other, and he'd disappear. And then, but this time after the Minton acquisition, I had I told him, I says, I've been camping out waiting for you because I know when you come down here, I got to congratulate you on this. And he goes, he says, well, he says, he's got a long way to go, but he's wired the right way.
He's got a lot of good things in him. I think he's like in the top 10 in rookie scoring this year. I really like the way he's playing. I can't say right now and label him what he's going to be. I just think he's going to continue to grow, especially getting the ice time he's getting. And as you said before, he's the champion of last year's trade deadline. And if they can do it again, because the stories that came out of here in Toronto, it was between him and Easton Cowan, and the Bruins scouts labeled Fraser Minton as the guy they wanted. So the Leafs were
They
going to
nailed
trade.
it.
Yeah, the Leafs were going to trade Easton Cowan to the St. Louis Blues for Braden Shen and more. And that's the thing there. And the Bruins, that fell through. If the Toronto Maple Leafs were able to do that trade for the Shen brothers, the Boston Bruins never would have been able to do the Carlo trade, because that happened at the end of the trade deadline. They had conversations at the beginning, and this is what came out on Toronto radio. Conversations at the beginning, but they wanted to do the Shen brothers. They couldn't get the deal to happen because Braden wouldn't come unless Luke was coming. And so then they pivoted and they turned to the Boston Bruins, and the Bruins got their guy. They wanted Fraser Minton, just like in the Charlie Coyle trade. Will Zellers was the guy, and Casey Middlestat was the throw-in that's turned out to be a very serviceable hockey player for the Boston Bruins. And I think he's come into his own playing the wing, and I think he's actually resurged his career. I think he's played well enough. I think
Yes.
that second line has quietly been a very good line for the Boston Bruins this year. So I think there's a lot of things that are playing into the Bruins being better. I still want to see the consistency. I don't want to see the hills anymore. I want to see a consistent. If you're going to lose for 2 games in a row, but come back. I don't want to see this streak of 6 on, 6 off, 6 on. I need to see some consistency. I think that comes with our defense, because a lot of times when the Boston Bruins have been losing this year, it's because they've been giving up way too many odd man rushes, way too many high danger chances, and it seems to be at the beginning of the game.
It's not just the defensive personnel; it's the forecheck
Yeah, the
and
team
the fact
defense.
that
My apologies.
they're just right. They're just doing a much better job of reloading and making sure that there's somebody high when the first thing doesn't cut off the play. They make sure that they have such. Minton has from day one, Minton forechecks and pathways that remind me of Patrice Bergeron. It's like he's thinking on a higher plane than go get the puck. Jonathan Toews would always do this thing where he'd swing his stick this side, that side, this side, that side, as he comes into you with his wide stance and challenge you to a duel like, how which way are you going to go? We're going to get you either way. And he could do that on a Blackhawks team that in its prime had such incredibly quick sticks throughout the lineup. Minton is more like Bergeron. He's got to appear. He's thinking, when I do this, the play's going that way, and we're reloading this way. We're going to get them right there. He's already got that going in his head, and he's so young. It's unbelievable. He plays the game like he's 38,
So
and he can skate. He's got quads like Castellic. The kid is really solid.
anytime someone talks about quads, I always think of Steve Thomas. And someone once said to me, he's like, got the biggest quads in the league. But I wanted to pivot, because I wanted to talk about a guy that started off hot this year. Hot. And that's Morgan Geekie, because I've been seeing, luckily enough, the Bruins are winning. I think that is kind of helped him out. The Bruins have been winning when he's been cold. So I think the fan base is kind of like laid off a little bit, because I also think the expectations weren't as high on him as someone like Pasternak. If Pasternak was on this much of a, 9 games now without a goal, considering how many goals he had, or 9 or 10 games, I can't remember. I don't have it written down. But should we be worried about Morgan Geekie? I seem to think we shouldn't. He rings that one off the crossbar last night, and I was like, he scored that at the beginning of the year, and that's going to get in his head. And I was actually shocked when Detroit pulled the goalie, that Sturm put out the 4th line instead of throwing Geekie on the ice to let him have a frickin' bone. I was actually disappointed in Marco Sturm at that point. I understand Kastelic's gone more games without a goal, but if you're Marco Sturm, I understand you're rewarding the 4th line. Go get a goal, empty net. I was shocked he didn't just throw Geekie over the boards. Go get it as an empty net. Go get that off your back. But what is your take on Morgan Geekie right now?
I don't know. Maybe Geeky would have taken that more as a kind of like a charity case and wants to score it honest. And I do think that he and Sturm have already been through it. I kind of feel like he's playing a better game right now, and that's why he's getting those looks, is because I think he got into a little bit of a trap. There's two things that happened that are separate. One is he got into a little bit of a trap where he was getting on the ice and thinking, score, rather than play the hockey game. And I remember Steve Leach was acquired in '91 for Randy Burridge, and Steve Leach, a hometown kid, scored a bunch of goals for the Boston Bruins. The next year, he came out there, and every time he got near the puck, it looked like he wanted to shoot it right through the building. And he stopped playing the game and just letting it come naturally. And I think that this is what happens to guys who have sudden success with goal production. That's one thing. And I think Sturm is Geekie thinking more about do what you do well and focus on that, and the goals will come. And we already saw a post. We already saw a couple of big saves by Cam Talbot. Best game I've ever seen Cam Talbot play
Yeah,
last
yeah,
night.
Geekie should have scored last night. He had
Yeah,
2 guaranteed goals. They were taken away from him.
right. So I think he's back. In that regard, he's back. And I think that from a mechanical standpoint, wherever he starts on the ice, the recent realignment of Geekie to a right back to right wing, he's had to reconfigure how do I get into my scoring positions, because he's one of those right wingers who's better when he's scoring from the left, not just a one timer from the left circle, but whether it's out of the corner, off the wall, down the middle, stick is inside for that guy. Mike Knuble was once described by a seasoned Bruins beat writer around the year 2000 or 2001, maybe two, as a big slow nothing. Well, Robbie Ftorek, after Bill Guerin left the Bruins in free agency after the 01-02 season for the big money in Dallas, he put Knuble as the left winger with Joe Thornton and Glenn Murray, after which Claude Julien dubbed them the 700-pound line. But Knuble, the right shot was stick inside, became a 30-goal scorer. Why? It's not true for everybody. Not everybody has to play it like the 1970s Russians, where sticks are always inside, like power plays do. What you do is you look at a guy and you say, okay, what is he? What does he do well? Steve Hines was on a track for 40 goals in 96-97 season, that horrible year. But he was lights out until Darius Kasparaitis broke his body with a mid-ice hit. And Stevie Hines always got his stuff from the left. He was right-handed shot. Didn't have the breakaway speed to go down the wing like Guy Lafleur. Didn't have the power to run people over like Cam Neely. So he was never going to be a big goal scorer with a right shot from the right side. And he had a horrible deke to his backhand. But man, could he shoot the lights out from the middle of the rink or the left. And that's how Geekie is. Geekie has got a lot of Wayne Cashman in his game. He's not pretty when he skates, but the puck tends to follow him. And he makes good plays. He's a thoughtful player. I think that helps in his hockey mind, that he wanted to be a baseball player but couldn't make it. So he was a hockey player instead. And so he thinks he has fresh thoughts on the ice. So he can find his way. And they need him to find his way to those scoring spots. But I would love to have a chart. And I'm not technically proficient enough to do this with the amount of time I have in my life, to see the spot from which Geekie has scored all his goals this year. Because I guarantee you, there are very few, if you did a dotted line from the middle of the net to the middle of the other net, that would come from the right-hand side of the ice.
Well,
They're down the middle or they're on the left.
Was from the left. His crossbar hit was from the left, from his spot. That's his spot. His spot is like the Ovechkin off the dot.
And the breakaway where he flipped the puck right into Talbot's glove, he came in off the right side. And a similar player was Michael Ryder. He scored 30 goals 2 years ago, 2 years in a row in Montreal. And then Claude Julien, the Bruin, got Peter Chiarelli to bring him to Boston for the 08-09 season. And Claude Julien knew exactly what to do with him. Somebody did put up a YouTube of Michael Ryder's goal, all 30 of his goals from the prior season. And I watched it and I marked it down. And I think there was one goal that came from, he's a right shot. There was one goal that came from right side of center. And that was a broken play where bodies were down and it was a loose puck and he just slammed it in the net. Every other play, he was just great at coming out of the corner where he could either go hard at the net with the puck, skate toward the circle and shoot, go to the point, fake one way, go to the other point. He just really was good at that part of the game. And Claude Julien knew exactly what to do with Michael Ryder and make him a good player for the Bruins. And it just so happens that whether it's Mike Knuble back in 0203 with the 700-pound line, or Ryder joining the Bruins in 0809, or Morgan Geekie going to the left wing after the trade deadline, that is his spot. For whatever reason, he doesn't have the speed down the right. He's not quite physical enough to bowl people over the way Cam Neely did, but he just has magic. He's money if he gets the puck in the middle or the left. And that's where he needs to be. Now, if Sturm doesn't want to line him up there and wants to put him on a line as right wing, needs to find his way there. That's the mechanical end of the Geekie question.
Okay. Well, that's great. I'm with you. I think Geekie's going to be fine, but I wanted to end it off on a couple of things here. Because we're getting on there at the time, and I wanted to ask you, because Mick, you've been around the game since I started watching the game. Even though I was born in the late 70s, my first memories of watching hockey were late 80s, early 90s. You've been around the game for a long time. You have seen more at the Garden than anybody I know. I wanted to know some of the craziest stories that you have seen on and off the ice surrounding the Boston Bruins.
I got a good one that includes profanity.
That's fine.
So during the 94-95 season, which I like to call the 95 season because it was a lockout, shortened, delayed season, 48 games beginning in late January, much like the so-called 12-13 season. Brian Sutter was in his last of his 3 years coaching the Boston Bruins, and they had that playoff series against the New Jersey Devils, who would go on to win the Stanley Cup that year. And the Devils just absolutely blew the Bruins out of the building in Boston, games 1 and 2. Just thumped them. Had a bad feeling about that series. The first moment, puck goes down one end, the Bruins jump out of the way of the contact. Puck goes down the other end, the Bruins jump out of the way of the contact. I'm thinking, okay, we got a problem here. Series shifts to New Jersey. The Bruins eke out a Game 3 win. So I decide to go down for Game 4 to the Meadowlands. Go down to the Meadowlands. They're in overtime. And I'm right over the Blaine Locker net in the auxiliary press seating on that end of the Brendan Byrne Arena. And sure enough, rookie defenseman John Roloff cuts out in front of the Blaine Locker, and Randy McKay pokes Roloff's stick, which I think is the one that hit the puck and went under Locker, and the place erupts. And I'm thinking, this was one goal from being a 2-2 series going back to Boston, and instead the Devils are celebrating and the Bruins are devastated. Now, because at the time I was a sports editor for a group of weekly papers in Rhode Island, but on my time, I was running around with a microphone and a recorder feeding postgame to a nationwide syndicated overnight radio program. So I needed to go to get the Devils' reactions. So here I am, suit and a tie. I'm in the mode where I just want to meet people and establish a career covering the NHL. I'm a few years into it. And I'm racing around, and I get in my Devil stuff, and I'm thinking the Bruins are probably gone by now, but I got to go find out. So I run all the way around the rink on the underbelly of the Brendan Byrne, and I finally find my way to the Bruins area. And in those old arenas, they don't have one big locker room. They're like split them in a bunch of little ones. So I'm walking through all these little locker rooms thinking, is there anybody left? Is there anybody left? And I'm trapped because there's no way for me to divert out of this. I arrive, and I got my recorder, my microphone in my hand, and who's standing there in the middle of the empty last room looking at rolled up tape and paper cups with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up to the elbows? Brian Sutter. And he turns his head toward me, and if looks could kill, that would be the moment. And I'm thinking in that moment, now I had an interview with Brian Sutter thanks to Hockey Stars magazine. My New Jersey-based friend Keisha Chiabatari kind of hooked me up with Dave Rosenbaum, who was the editor of Hockey Stars magazine, and I got to sit with Sutter during Bruins practice and to do a feature on Raymond Bourque, which was in Boston Garden, which was really an awesome thing for me to be able to do at that point in my career. And so I had that experience with Sutter, but this was a tough loss, and he was an ornery man after they lost games. I'm alone with him now, trapped. There's nowhere to go. So I just walked over him and extended my hand. And I said, I just want to say, fuck. And he grabs my hand real tight and he goes, that's why they call it the fucking Stanley Cup playoffs. And you know what? I'm going to be a bigger prick and I'm going to come back and win the next one. And I'm like feeling like I'm getting an electric shock from him shaking my hand and everything.
He just probably hadn't spoken in minutes.
So now they go off. The Bruins go back home and they lose game 5. And the next day he gets fired. And on the same day, the Celtics fired coach Chris Ford, their former player. So I've scared my dog. She doesn't, the F-bomb where she used to live, I think was not a good thing. So anyway, the next year, Brian Sutter comes into the Fleet Center, now known as TD Garden, with the Calgary Flames. And during the game day skate, there's a big scrum of media around him in Boston to interview him before the Bruins going to play the Flames that night. And I kind of was late to that scrum, but Sutter stops in the middle of it and reaches through the crowd with his hand to shake hands with me and gives me a big smile before resuming. And then people looking at me like, who the hell are you? But that was a very gratifying moment out of a very scary situation that I found myself in the early stages of my years reporting on the NHL. So that's my F-bomb Brian Sutter story.
I like it. It's almost right up there with like I really like it. When you say what you said at the very end, it reminds me of when you and I were in the belly of the beast at TD Garden and we were trying to get me into the media room while a certain someone was still talking. And we're like, how funny would it be if you just get me in the back and I could be like, from the back here, and he'd just give the look of like, what the F are you doing in here? Like, why are you even in this room? But I wanna end on I love that story, but I want to end on something that is happening in Boston this week, and that, well, is it this week or next week? It's this week, right?
No, it's tomorrow.
Tomorrow against the Seattle Kraken, which is very interesting. I'm surprised they didn't do it against Detroit, original 6 team. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. But they're doing it against Seattle. But I guess maybe because it's
the Islanders.
Yeah, just somebody. It just made more sense to do it. But this is the Boston Bruins. They want to sell the Seattle Kraken game, and that's why they did it. Why am I even saying this out loud without even thinking about that?
Should Thursday sell itself?
Yes,
that sounds always the great Bruins night.
You say that, Mick, because I always tell people I always go down to Boston for St. Patty's Day usually, and you can always make sure that you're going to have a Thursday night game and a Saturday afternoon game in Boston for St. Patty's Day week. It's just going to happen. It's the perfect time to go to Boston. It's right after the trade deadline. It's like the best time to go to Boston to go see a game. The weather is also beautiful. It's sweater weather, and it's perfect. It's just great.
Sweater weather.
Yeah, I had to say it that way.
I saw what you did there.
Yeah, I know. I had to. But I wanted to ask you, as someone that was around Zdeno Chara throughout his whole career in Boston, what are some moments that capture your attention the most about his presence on and off the ice in his career as a Boston Bruin?
Yeah. There have been a lot of good ones that I think one of the cool ones for me is always going to be the Winter Classic at Fenway Park, the one that you have below me, for 2010 versus Philadelphia. They told the media early in the game, and we were up in the press box, you could probably see me if you had this thing close up enough, depending on when in the game it happens, because they said that at 10-minute mark of the third period.
This has to be the first period because it's daylight.
Thank you. Good call. So I'm there. And they say halfway through the third period, 10-minute mark, if you want access to the Boston Bruins and the Red Sox clubhouse, then you must report to the Red Sox clubhouse at the 10-minute mark of the third period. So I'm writing on deadline for the Standard Times in New Bedford, Mass., my legacy newspaper, and I've worked there 20 years. And so I go downstairs, and Fenway still has that same old asphalt concourse with the puddles, and Steve Levy and Barry Melrose is looking up at a crappy old little monitor there and watching the game. And I'm standing by the door all by my lonesome. On my way down, I saw a parade of Winter Classic jerseys leaving, people wanting to beat the traffic, looking depressed. The Bruins are down 1-0. I get down there and I'm thinking, okay, flashback to 1965. My father brings my brother and I in to see the Red Sox play the Kansas City Athletics. My favorite player, Tony Conigliaro in right field. So much so that I made the fans laugh when I yelled, "Hey, Knig, in case you don't know, you're my favorite player." I was doing it honestly. They all thought it was funny. I'm thinking, why are they laughing? Well, I had to take a whiz real bad. My dad says, "Yeah, but Knig's up." And I said, he ain't going to do nothing. I think he was 0 for 3. So back in Fenway, you stand in front of this sink, this 20-foot long sink, and you do your business. And then I could hear the rumbling above me. By the time I came back out into the exit to go back up to my seat, he was already back in the dugout. Knig had put one in the left field screen. Before the monster seats, there was a screen and to catch the balls over the left field wall. And he had hit a home run and I missed it. So here I am in front of the Red Sox clubhouse door, waiting for this game end so I can get in there because I need to talk to Chara. I decided I'm talking to Zdeno Chara after this game. Now, I don't know where he's seated in there. I hear the rumble above me. I'm reliving 1965 all over again. I hear the rumble, and then I hear the goal horn. I'm thinking, you gotta be kidding me. I look down and Steve Levy and Barry Melrose are looking up laughing, thinking, oh my God, we got overtime. So now I'm trying to stand halfway between the door and halfway down the hill toward where they are watching this monitor to kind of try to keep one eye on it. So I don't really see Sturm score the winning goal. I just see that they scored the winning goal. And by now, 1 or 2 other people have come. I'm getting back in my spot as soon as I saw them coming to make sure that I don't lose my spot. Of course, all the people come in after the game and they're all lining up and they're all going to try to muscle me and push me through and give me the tush push to get me to move on. Well, as it turns out, immediately on the left-hand side after you go through the door, Zdeno Chara, that's where his spot is. And I'm not moving. I'm making sure everybody's got to go around me. I don't care if they're going to hit me in the head with their cameras. I'll throw elbows. I will fight. I was ready to go. I had missed everything. I was reliving my childhood. And I am like, F you. I'm here. That's it. I'm ready to drop them right now.
Meanwhile, I'm in the stands, drunk as a skunk and figuring out how I got to walk back to my hotel.
So you had the better deal, I think.
Yeah.
So sure enough, Chara, what were you thinking when time was dwindling? And it was the greatest quote that could have come out of the day. He said, we realized that if we don't score, we're not ever going to get to hear what it sounds like when we score. I thought that was like the most human reaction thing he could have said. And I got my quote. I got my story. I got the lead off to my column on the game. And I was very happy with how it turned out. And I just watched it later 100 times, whether I meant to or not, because it got played so much. The 2 goals and the play that Patrice Bergeron made off the left boards to set up the Marco Sturm game winner.
That was
it's just
that was the game my dad fell in love with Patrice Bergeron. He was my favorite player at the time. I kept telling my dad, but my dad was still a lot of players, for people who don't realize, when they leave the game, they don't watch the game a lot. They almost walk away from the game for a little bit.
Mhm.
And
They
that
need to.
game, yeah, exactly. That game, my dad turns to me and goes, I get it now. And he's like, good choice. Because
Yeah,
that was the game live. Bergeron was unbelievable in that game. That was
that's right.
it was my second outdoor game. I got to go see the game in Buffalo as well, but it was my first Boston Bruins. It was the Boston Bruins' first Winter
Oh,
Classic.
you saw the Crosby shootout breakaway
Yes,
where
I
he
was at
slowed
that game.
down.
Yeah.
The first guy to slow
Well,
down.
it's interesting enough, that first Winter Classic, the game didn't sell out right away, and for people in Toronto, we go to a lot of Buffalo games, so it was flooded. Everybody was like, "We can get tickets, we can get tickets." So we all went to that game because a lot of people were like, "I don't
Wow.
wanna go see a hockey game outside." And I was like, "Why don't we wanna see a hockey game outside?" I'll still say
Just
my
one. That was
experience at
storybook, that game.
Fenway was better than Gillette. I did not like Gillette, not just because of the outcome of the
No,
game,
I
but it
didn't
was so
either.
cold that day Like, remember the wind on the oh my god, it was brutal. It was the worst. But I have very fond memories of that, and that was the game. You having your memory of Chara that way, that was the game where my dad turned to me and he started watching hockey again because of the way
Hmm.
Patrice Bergeron played. But my Chara moment, I is game 5. I met Mick before the game. We had a couple pops with a couple
The
people.
Forest, which no
Yes,
longer
that's
exists.
no longer there. One of my
Not
favorite
not on
places in
Canal Street, it does.
yes. But, we had a couple pops before the game, and, I've never heard an arena so loud for a man or anything, and I was at Batista Bat Flip, for when the Toronto Blue Jays beat the Texas Rangers. I was at that game, and I could feel that in my chest. I will say this, when the Garden erupted for the spotlight, because that's what it was. We all knew he was there, but when that
Yeah,
spotlight hit him, you could feel I swear if I wasn't outside, people were outside probably could have heard it. Like, it
yeah.
was loud, that
Mhm,
eruption for one man.
mhm,
It sucks what happened in the game, and I don't wanna relive it,
mhm.
but that was my moment for Zdeno Chara. I so my last question to you is, do you think tomorrow night when you're at the Garden, can they get it that loud?
No. I feel like there's too much separation between the current fan base and Zdeno's career. I do feel like there'll be a lot of heartfelt applause, but it can't possibly match the euphoria of respect shown to him and the roar that he got for showing up to play that game with a broken jaw. And Don Sweeney recently told the story of visiting Zdeno in the hospital when he couldn't speak and him asking for a pad of paper. I mean, and just say, I wrote on it, I'm playing. I mean, the guy is just incredible what I mean, look at him in retirement, running the marathons and just he just has such competitive fire. It's a no-brainer that the Bruins brought him back into the organization. And I'm sure his role will evolve in time. And I won't
So
predict
wh
what that'll
Oh,
be.
okay,
But I know
we'll
what
leave
you'd
that
love
one.
to see. I
I
know what you'd
know.
love to see.
I think we're gonna I'll do it because Mick can't. I will predict that he one day will have, a certain, number 8's job, and that will be his job, and for people that don't realize, Zdeno Chara is not just a gifted hockey player and a physical specimen, for athleticism. He's an extremely smart individual. Extremely
Yeah.
smart. He did, night school a lot while playing for the Boston Bruins to get degrees, to get, his license to be a real estate agent at one
Yeah.
point. That
This
man
guy just
exactly, extremely smart, and I even before game 5, I knew he was playing because I got a text saying, "There's not a doubt in my mind that that man's playing." Like, there was no doubt from Bruins at that time that that man was missing a game. Not even a little bit. They didn't think it at all. So, I wanna end it on a great note because I think, it's a well-deserved night tomorrow night in Boston. If you're listening to this, it's actually tonight because this is airing, the morning of the game, but, uh, the man deserves every accolade he's gonna get tonight in Boston as you're listening. He is a testament to what it is to be a Boston Bruin. Um,
He's a modern day Lionel Hitchman. As Dick Johnson, the curator of the Sports Museum, pointed out while we were deliberating as the committee selecting the 20 all time Bruins, in his unsuccessful bid to get Lionel Hitchman onto the team, he said that he gave the Bruins their culture. And how many players can do that? I mean, Eddie Shore might have been the face of the Bruins, but Lionel Hitchman gave them their culture. And that is one of the reasons the Philadelphia Flyers won the Stanley Cup. And one of the reasons the Boston Bruins won it in 70 and 72. It wasn't just Oren Esposito and Johnny Busick. It it was, as Derek Sanderson reminded me, they had a great group of hockey players that really got the game and how to play it and were competitive and played for one another. And like the Flyers had like 8 of those guys when they won. It takes a village. Great players. Look at Connor McDavid this deep into his career. He's come close, but he hasn't won it. Will he ever? Well, we won't know until we know. But you gotta have everything. There's always more. There's always more than you need. And and credit to the management teams that are patient enough to build it out and keep on looking for that missing ingredient rather than blowing it all up because it didn't happen on the timeline that the fans want to see it. But Lionel Hitchman, who's number 3, hangs at TD Garden, and Z is 33. Hitchman's 3, right? Hitchman's number, as Kevin Votor pointed out to me, you met Kevin Votor, the hockey historian who longtime Bruins season ticket holder and author of the reference piece, the Bruins book of 1997. He pointed out to me that Hitchman, because the Toronto Maple Leafs put the number 6 back in circulation for Ron Ellis, and it was retired for Ace Bailey, the original Ace Bailey. The Lionel Hitchman's number 3 is the most continuously retired number in the history of sports. There is no number anywhere that has been retired longer continuously than Hitchman's number 3. And so Chara's 33 is kind of a neat bookend to that, as being a guy who gave the Bruins the culture, all fresh and new, what they really never really had after Ray Bourque left. They never really had that culture again until he came along and reinstituted it for the team. And Patrice Bergeron grew within that, and Chara acknowledged him in his Hall of Fame speech as being his co-captain and his deputy, or whatever you want to call it. And so the Bruins got their culture back thanks to Zdeno Chara. And credit Peter Chiarelli for identifying him. Working for the Ottawa Senators, he obviously got to know Z really well, and saw that he was ready to take on and be, rather than join a team that was ready to win, he became the foundational player that helped the Bruins achieve the ultimate goal in 2011. And the Bruins owe him this night and more because of it. So good for them and good for him that they have a happy relationship now that is going to see Chara's role with the team evolve in the coming years. Who knows, maybe decades. And it's pretty exciting what the potential is when you consider that who knew what Chara's potential was when he first got here in the fall of 06. Did anybody realize the legacy that he would leave on the ice? And now they have him in the front office. That's pretty scary good.
Yeah, and in fact, you had players last night talking about how he's the mentor to the team. But on that note, Mick Colageo, thank you so much. I call Mick the hockey encyclopedia. I think you can tell why by listening to this episode. He remembers more facts about the game than I will ever in my life. People say I know a lot about the game of hockey. Mick rivals me so much. It's unbelievable. I have had hockey conversations with him for years about this. One day he'll probably write a book and it'll be called there's a nice puck. I know where that came from.
I love the smell of vulcanized rubber.
But thank you, Mick, for joining me. Where can people find you?
Rink Wrap. I link to it on X and Facebook. My days actually helping out with Boston hockey now or have ended, but I still, say hello to Dan Kingerski and have a good relationship with them. The Hockey News just came out with its money power issue. I write the Bruins piece for that, and I anticipate that maybe, I think it's been 3 years running now, that they'll give me a call to do the prospects issue, which they call Future Watch. That should be coming up fairly soon.
And as a subscriber, I will be getting it. I make sure to let Mick know when I read those articles. But thank you, everyone. I truly appreciate every single one of you. Appreciate the last 2 years of doing Bruins Diehards. There's more years to come. Please leave me a like, leave me a subscribe. I'll see you next time.